Do you believe in aliens? Have you ever seen one? Do you know someone who's seen one? How do you feel about aliens? Today, I am so fortunate to share Dr. Seth Shostak with you. He is a senior astronomer and institute fellow at the SETI Institute located in California, USA. Also today on the show, I have Jamie Smale, who is an alien enthusiast. And I am so happy to bring the two of them together for you. Gentlemen, welcome to Conversations with Jenny Lynn.
Thank you very much, Jenny Lynn.
Thank you.
Jamie, I decided it would be a good idea to ask Seth if he would be willing to do a show with you as a part of it because of your views about aliens. So why don't we start by having you tell Seth, your views on this subject and why you're so passionate about it.
Certainly. Well, thank you for asking. Okay, I'd love to. Okay, so I have never seen an alien, nor a UFO, unfortunately. It would be lovely to, but not that I know of. So the passion derives from simple like mathematical logic, which I'm sure you'll comment on, Seth, because this is your field. But I think really what resonated with me is when I heard about the Drake equation from Frank Drake, which is obviously coming up with the formula of the likelihood, the probability of life beyond the planet Earth. And no doubt you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but this calculation was to calculate the probability of intelligent life, not bacterial life. And the final outcome of the whole, it's a long story, but it was calculated about 10,000 advanced civilizations just within the Milky Way alone, which I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that most modern day scientists think that he was off and that he dramatically underestimated that because, we have obviously, potentially a lot more. And I think in modern times, scientists have, discovered what they call the Kepler planets, Earth-like planets in the Goldilocks zone that can possibly harbor life. And, as the years pass by, we're coming across more and more of these. So, it seems as though there's quite a lot of planetary systems with a planet that is a good candidate, but that's only life as we know it. We're basing this, and so is the Drake equation based on, what we require to be healthy and to thrive and to survive. So we're not even considering any other type of life form that perhaps has different requirements. So I think to me it's so logical. Now also there's the ancient religions, ancient stories, ancient writings that allude to aliens. There's the anomaly in the evolutionary process of man. There's that sort of what many call the missing link, which creationists would attribute to God having intervened and created humankind. But you could also say that this anomaly of a sudden evolutionary leap was maybe alien intervention. I happen to go along with that theory as a possibility. So to me, there's just so much, but there's also so much eyewitness testimony. There's radar and satellite evidence of not extraterrestrial. We don't want to jump the gun here, but we're talking about UFOs. And I am aware of the fact that a UFO does not necessarily mean extraterrestrial. UFO is a UFO, it's unidentified. Could be a number of possibilities. However, the process of elimination, and one thing I wanted to ask you about today, Seth, and no doubt we'll get to it at some point, is this recent news, the Pentagon disclosure to Congress, where there's been a lot of activity with the Navy out at sea, and there's all these UFOs. They call them UAPs, don't they? Because UFO has people are embarrassed of that word, so they sort of call them, UAPs. And, they've got like crazy maneuverability, no visible propulsion. They're doing crazy things. And, it could be foreign adversary. They're saying it could be a foreign adversary. They're not ruling out extraterrestrials, which I think is a really big statement from the government to actually say we don't rule it out. They don't believe it. They're saying we're not saying it's extraterrestrial, but we don't rule it out. I think that's a big leap for the government. They've never actually said that before. I was quite pleased with that result. So, like for me personally, as I sit and I observe these things and I watch the news, I'm thinking, well, okay, process of elimination, this advanced technology is pretty advanced. It's not up for debate because like they know, because, we got trained observers, documenting these sightings. We've got it collaborated with radar and satellite. It's not a question like, are these things in the sky? Yes, they're in the sky. Like we know that. So the question only remains is what are they and who controls them? And so considering how advanced they are, we can't prove it, but it wouldn't be so far-fetched to believe that maybe they're extraterrestrial. And what do? We're UFOs, we're aliens. We send craft to other planets, well, to Mars, and the moon. When we do that, like we're UFOs. Why is it so far-fetched to believe that others are likewise sending probes or drones or whatever they're sending to our planet? So it's not so unbelievable to me. It's very, if I had to put some money on it, I would put my money on that they exist. I suppose the question is have they visited Earth? I think it's a good possibility, but obviously like we don't have cast iron proof of that. So that's where I'm at with aliens and UFOs and whatnot. So if that answers the question, hope it wasn't too long-winded.
Well,
what's your response?
well, Jenny Lynn, I think Jamie's not going to be happy with my answer.
Okay.
No, please go ahead.
Well, there were many things in that, Jamie. I mean, we could talk about the Drake equation. I don't think anybody says that Frank Drake is wrong, because nobody knows whether he's right or wrong. And he himself, I mean, his office is just down the hall here, although he doesn't come in very much anymore. But I've asked him many times, your estimate for the number of societies in the Milky Way galaxy that might be broadcasting radio signals, for example, that are going through our bodies as we sit here. He says, yeah, well, maybe 10,000. But when I press him, when anybody presses him, Frank, where did you get that number? He'll say, well, it just occurred to me driving in from Santa Cruz yesterday. I mean, it's nothing more than that. It's just his order of magnitude estimate. Carl Sagan thought there might be millions. There are plenty of people who write me emails who say it's probably only one. We're the smartest things in the galaxy, if not the universe, which is a nice thought, and probably caused by the fact that for the first 10 years of your life, your parents were probably telling you something very similar, but it's probably not true. Now, let me not go any farther on the question of, Drake's equation. That's a different subject, but the one I can tell that you're a little more interested in is, are we being visited? Now, here in the States, I don't know what the situation is in Ireland, but in the States, 1/3 of the population thinks that we are being visited and that the government is covering it up. Okay, 1/3. So that's 100 million people on this continent, and not counting Canada, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, or any other such wonderful place. It's a very, very common belief, which, of course, organizations like the History Channel and so forth like to take advantage of because they know the public's interested. There's no good evidence. You will be hard-pressed to find any scientists who believe that, actually. Essentially none. And the reason is the evidence is so poor. I mean, it's also difficult, right? Yeah, we can get to Mars. Elon Musk can send a rocket to Mars. He hasn't done it yet, but he could send a rocket to Mars that would get there in 6 or 7 months. But if you want to go to the nearest other star at that speed, it would take 75,000 years. And that's really a long time to sit in a middle seat eating, peanuts off your lap, right? So that's not easy. That's not easy. It isn't to say it's impossible. Doesn't violate physics, but it's not easy. As far as the evidence for this, there are 10,000 witness reports every year in the US, 10,000, that's a large number. A lot of them are people whom you would normally trust in a business transaction. Many of them are pilots and so forth. Navy pilots in particular are really good at looking for other aircraft. They're not so good at looking for alien spacecraft, but anyhow, they're perfectly good explanations for those 3 Navy videos, by the way, that don't involve aliens. And the report that the military intelligence, well, let's just say the Pentagon for shorthand, that the Pentagon released about a month and a half ago, 8 pages. It didn't even mention extraterrestrials or aliens. It didn't. And that's because they don't consider it a very serious, that's my take on it. They didn't consider it a very serious hypothesis. But so we'll have to agree to disagree. I don't think there's any good evidence that they're here.
Well, no. Yeah, well, thank you for that. And yeah, I agree that there is no cast iron evidence. I just believe that it's a possibility. Do you believe it's a possibility, or do you rule it out completely?
Well, I'm certainly not convinced, but it's, as I say, it doesn't violate physics, so it could happen. But there are a couple of things you might ask yourself if you think that's true. To begin with, there are about 800 satellites in orbit around the Earth that are aimed downwards. Their cameras are aimed down. So they're making photos. You can see them, you just go on Google Earth. I can find my car on Google Earth. So you would think that if there were things flying around, that occasionally a Google Earth photograph would see that. There are, of course, much better images, mostly, taken by the military, but not just the military of the United States, right? There are plenty of other, those satellites are not all American by any means, right? And yet they don't seem to show any UFOs. You can do a quickie calculation. Amateur astronomers, will go out with their telescopes at night whenever it's clear and check out whatever they're looking at, the moons of Jupiter or nebulae or galaxy, whatever. They never see them either, right? There's a radar fence that the US uses to detect, incoming missiles and aircraft that shouldn't be in our airspace and stuff like that. And they can see a marble, something the size of a marble, about 200 miles up, which is pretty good, I have to say, for radar. Anyhow,
yeah, that is right.
But they don't see any of this stuff either, right? So, you've got 70 years of claims that the aliens are here, occasionally crash landing in the New Mexico desert, but somehow nobody else sees them. If you had asked the Narragansett Indians of Massachusetts, in 1620, do you think there are Europeans here in Massachusetts? They would have absolutely no trouble pointing you to those guys down the road there. There they are, right? It wasn't something that the chiefs could keep secret. So,
sure.
Seth, how long have you been involved in this field?
Well, I studied astronomy in school, so if you consider that this field, I certainly bought a book about UFOs when I was in the 8th grade. So I guess I was about, 14 years old or 13, something like that. Yeah, very interesting. I enjoyed it. All the photos in that book look like automobile hubcaps that somebody had thrown up in the air and taken a picture of.
So since you've been in the field for so long, you've never had anybody call you, send you information, or privy to anything that would remotely resemble extraterrestrials?
Oh, no, every day, Jenny Lynn. I get phone calls every day, emails, on those days I don't get phone calls, and sometimes the same day, right, from people who are having difficulties with aliens in their personal lives. Actually, for a while there were 3 people, they were all women, but I don't think that means anything, who claimed that they were aliens, right?
They were aliens
themselves. Yes, they claimed they were aliens. And I asked one of these women, I said, so how do you know you're an alien? And she said, the eyes. So I said, well, I wrote her back. I said, do you have any photos of your eyes? And she sent me 10 photographs of her eyes. They were just eyes. I mean, if you'd seen them on your sister or your cousin Louise, you would have said, well, those are Louise's eyes, but you wouldn't say that she was an alien, I don't think.
So I have seen pictures and I've heard of stories, and I'm sure Jamie has seen some too, where they show an abandoned flat-shaped ship that they found in a desert somewhere or in some remote area that somehow seemed abandoned, and they've referred to them as crashed spaced alien ships. Have you ever seen any of those pictures, and how did you explain those? What do you think those were?
Well, if they look like spacecraft, if they look like saucers, that's your first clue that it's not for real, because that whole term, flying saucers, why do they always look like saucers? None of our spacecraft look like saucers, right? That's because the first instance, which actually got a lot of publicity, was in 1947, a guy who sold fire extinguishers, so forth, a guy by the name of Kenneth Arnold. He had his own private plane, or at least he could fly. I don't know if the plane was his. And he was flying around the state of Washington. And he saw something, out the window. And it was very unusual. He thought these things were moving very quickly, which, by the way, keep in mind, you can only tell if it's moving quickly if you know how far away it is, right? Otherwise, you don't know. I mean, a bug could fly and a fly could, zip by your face and you would think, oh my God, that's 27 G's and it's moving at 37,000 miles an hour. It's just a couple of inches from your eyeballs. So you need to know how far away these things are. Anyhow, so he saw something, and when the press interviewed him about this event, because he did talk to a newspaper reporter, he said that they look like kind of boomerangs, and they moved the way saucers skipping on water move. They sort of bounce, bounce, bounce.
Yeah.
And ever after that, they became flying saucers because the reporter kind of misunderstood him. So if they look like saucers, that's wrong.
But just a quick question in regards to this this Pentagon disclosure, and that we know that we've got objects that are doing Mach 5 speed and no visible propulsion doing these things, right? I mean, like, what would be your take on that? So yeah, we have no evidence of extraterrestrial, but I mean, there's something, yeah. So
yeah, there's definitely something. Well, let me give you an example. There are 3 videos, and one of them is this white thing. It looks white. These videos, this is kind of a technical thing of not much interest to the audience, but they are infrared videos, all right? So they're made by a camera called a forward-looking infrared camera, FLIR. And so anything that looks black in the image is hot, right? Or at least warm. And anything that looks white is cool. So one of these things, you see this thing, it's above the waves of the ocean and it sort of moves by the camera. That's just a balloon, probably a weather balloon. Anyhow, it's cooler than the air around it, okay? So, or cooler, than the water beneath it. So it looks kind of white. And it only is moving because of the motion of the F-18 Hornet, the plane. Okay, so that one's easy to explain. The other 2 show things that look like kind of a tic-tac, candy, or just an elongated thing that occasionally rotates. And you know what that probably is? When you're up at 22,000 feet, because that was the altitude that at least some of these things were made from, at 22,000 feet, it's not that high, it's maybe 4 miles up or something. But if you're at 22,000 feet, the horizon, how far away you can see things, is close to 100 miles, okay? In fact, it's more than 100 miles. It's more like 150. Okay, so imagine that there's a plane, just a commercial jet, 2-engine, 4-engine jet, and it's 50 miles in front of this Navy jet. The Navy jet's camera is looking up the tailpipes of that plane, which of course they're jet engines, so they're very hot. So you get this elongated black thing because it's so far away, you don't see any detail, right? And so that it makes this elongated black thing. And of course, the radar from the ships doesn't find it, nor does the radar from the aircraft find it, because they're not looking 100 miles away. They're looking, in the next mile or 2. That's what's important if you're a Navy fighter. Right? You don't care what's 100 miles in front of you. You want to know what's in the next 5 miles in front of you. So they don't find it. And so I'm not saying that's what it was, but that's very, reasonable. It doesn't involve aliens. So you have your choice. Aliens, commercial airplane. Aliens, commercial airplane.
Sure. Yeah, well, you got to look at everything. You got to look at everything if you're open-minded.
Yeah.
You can't just jump to the alien theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there
so-
is a project, as you know, by this Harvard professor, Avi Loeb. He wants to do an experiment. One problem with the whole UFO field is they don't do any experiments. They just, look at data that have been already collected for other purposes, or they base it on witness testimony, which is just about the worst kind of evidence for science. Isaac Newton didn't say, well, I think F equals MA because I saw it. Well, you got to measure something. But anyhow, this guy, Avi Loeb, is trying to do an experiment. And he's a Harvard professor, and he's a very smart guy, actually. So probably to my detriment, I've been asked by him to be on his science advisory board. So I don't know what will come out of that. I'm terribly hopeful, but we'll see.
You're too humble. So
I
must
have a reason to be humble. Yes.
When I first came to the United States back in the day, when I was at home raising two girls, I watched a show by a woman it was a talk show, and her name was Sally Jesse Raphael. And the show was about three men who were somewhere in British Columbia, some lonely place out on the ocean, fishing at night. And they described this huge light that they cannot explain that sent a beam onto their boat. And then there are 4 or 5 hours of their lives that none of them can account for. One of them remembers being taken up from the boat onto an alien ship. And after this experience, he continued to get the beeping sound in his ear, and it sort of drove him crazy. So they took him to the hospital and they did some x-rays on him, and they found some strange looking crystal implanted in his leg. And these men, I watched them, they looked so convincing that somehow they were abducted by these aliens just because they're curious about us, that they weren't really hurt, but that this crystal that had been implanted in his leg, he felt was a way that they were monitoring humans through him and that crystal that was implanted in his leg. And I remember watching this and thinking, why would 3 grown men come on a show like this and seem so convincing? And so I wonder about the people like them, because I've heard, and Jamie, I don't know about you. Have you heard similar stories?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting you should bring that up, because I totally understand the skepticism, but we're talking about a lot of people with stories, and let's say that like a massive percentage of them are telling lies or deceived or whatever, whatever the case. What if what if 1 or 2 of them is right? I mean, some people have willingly undergone lie detector tests, and sometimes there are events where there's multiple eyewitnesses and the stories have remained the same for decades. So you have to wonder,
Yeah. Well, it would only take one. You don't need lots of them. Yeah. If one of them had good proof, or had proof, put it that way. If they had proof that stood up, then doggone it, I would be convinced too. The problem is that none of that, the evidence that these people present has ever risen to the level where it would justify an exhibit on Exhibition Road in London, right? None of the science museums has anything about this. And why is that? I mean, it's not because the public isn't interested. The public's enormously interested. But none of that evidence is considered, science. That's the problem. And if you're going to make a claim that, that we're being visited, that's important enough that you ought to have good evidence for it.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I mean, it certainly raises curiosity, but I understand. Yeah, you need some good evidence. I get it. But I do you mind if I ask a question, generally?
No, go ahead.
Okay, great. Oh, thanks. So because I know that you work for SETI, Seth, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I mean, I'm assuming because of your career that you're searching for extraterrestrials, so you believe that maybe that you're yet to find any evidence of them, but maybe somewhere inside of you, you would think that we're not alone in the universe. Would that be accurate? Or
Oh, that's totally accurate, Jamie. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I definitely believe that there's plenty of intelligence out there in the universe. There are like a trillion, that's a million, a trillion planets just in our galaxy. And we can see on the order of 2 trillion other galaxies, each with a trillion planets. Those numbers are so large, right, that if this is the best that the universe has to offer, all I can say is I'm really disappointed.
yeah,
I hardly believe that we're the only intelligence. But I mean, that's like asking me, do you think there could be animals with big long noses that can pick up peanuts? And I say, well, I don't know, but I mean, it's possible. Maybe there's an evolutionary niche for that kind of thing. But, the fact that I haven't seen them in my backyard doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that they're somewhere else. That's all it means.
Is it possible, Seth, that these other life forms, whatever title umbrella we want to place them under, is it possible that they may not be detected by some of the devices that you use in your institute?
Well,
Is it possible that you're just missing them because you need a certain type of lens, camera, whatever technology to spot them?
Well, I mean, that could be. I mean, our physics is not the end of all physics. There may be ways to exist without making anything our instruments can't measure. But if our instruments can't measure them, then I don't quite understand how Navy pilots can see them with their eyes either, right? You have to decide, are you going to accept evidence that's so straightforward that, pilots can see it? There it is, Bob. Or are you going to say, no, there's no way they could see it. You need the kind of instruments that we don't have or something like that. I mean, you can't rule out what you don't know, but you can't have it both ways. You have to decide either we have the kind of capability to find these things or we don't, in which case you can essentially say anything you want, right?
Well, there are people who believe that Bigfoot is real.
Yes, there are.
And they've seen evidence.
Yeah, there are problems with Bigfoot. There was a big press conference here up the street in Palo Alto.
Are you serious?
Yeah. No, it's we covered it for our podcast, but never mind what the deal was. They had a press conference because some good old boy hunters in Georgia went out and found what they claimed was a Bigfoot body. And they threw it into the back of their pickup truck and took it back and made a couple of very poor photos. And this press conference was about the fact that they had proven Bigfoot was real because, there was this body. Now, I have to tell you, they were very reluctant to give any more detail. And so my producer and I, we kind of tracked it down and we found a costume shop. I think it was in either Queens or Brooklyn in New York, where these guys had rented the gorilla costume that they photographed later. And these guys were all just making up a story for the notoriety. They thought they could make money on this deal. Look, here's the thing about Bigfoot. I mean, it's hard to have just one Bigfoot, right? It's like Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. You can't have just one because when that one dies, that's the end, right?
Yeah.
You need what is called a minimum breeding density. You probably need at least 50 of them. I don't know the exact number would be. And if there are that many of them so that the species doesn't die out right away, then presumably a lot of people would see them. I remember going to Loch Ness once a long time ago, and in a local pub, I asked the woman behind the counter, I said, do people here see Nessie all the time? She says, only after a few drinks.
Seth, we're going to run out of time soon. And the one thing I didn't ask you, which I should have at the inception, is to define SETI for those people who don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's almost my name. Well, it's SETI, and that stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And that's to find the aliens, not over the Pacific off of San Diego or anything like that, but just to find them at home, as it were, because it turns out that if they have some reasonably powerful transmitters, either for their own television or radar. Radar's pretty strong signal, or FM radio, something like that. You can find them even at light years distance using the kind of technology we have today. So that's what the experiment is, to try and see if we can pick up a signal from somebody else. We haven't so far.
So your instruments are because the reports we get of sightings are always in real rural, remote, lonely areas. A lot of people see them in Mount Shasta and in desert, sort of quiet, empty areas.
Right.
Do you have detective instruments in those areas?
Well, actually, it turns out we do, but it's totally coincidence. The telescopes that we use, we call them telescopes, radio telescopes, but they're just big antennas. And we have them in a place called Hat Creek, California, which is near, it's about 25 miles north of Mount Shasta. No. It's about 50 miles south of Mount Shasta, and it's north of Mount, what's the first one in the chain there? Anyhow, it's between two of these mountains. So it's in a part of California that's very rural, which means it's a good place to put one of these big antenna arrays, because you don't get all the interference from people's, home electronics and stuff like that. But yeah, you can go visit it next time you're up there. It's a beautiful country. I recommend it. Not too many good restaurants, but that's where we're looking for the aliens.
Well, so they're supposed to be under Mount Shasta. Have you heard that? People believe that there are aliens working underground with the government under Mount Shasta. So
under Mount Shasta?
Maybe you're standing on top of them.
Yeah, well, we're not on Mount Shasta exactly. Yeah, it was between Mount Shasta and Mount Lassen. We're actually a little closer to Mount Lassen, but who cares? Yes, well, if the aliens are underground, that's very convenient because nobody can see them. I think that's the point.
In all of your years, because you've clearly been doing this for many, many, many
years. Almost centuries now, yes.
Oh, wow.
So if anybody has come close to anything, have you ever had any information sent to you or received a phone call where you're like, is it possible? Did you ever have anything come across your desk that you thought, could it be? Or have you always been able to look at the evidence sent to you and just discredit it as somebody really wanting aliens to be part of our existence?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag, Jenny Lynn, because, if they claim that they saw, a typical call might be, well, 23 years ago, I was out in the backyard and I looked up at the sky and I saw this thing and these big lights were flying, and it was a triangular craft. For some reason, the aliens also like triangular craft. And it was headed for town or something like that. Do you know what it was? I don't know what it was. I mean, very hard for me to know what it was. But I do ask the people who get in touch with me, have one of these things they want to relate. I ask, do you happen to have any photos or film or video, something? And in about half the cases they do. And I say, well, I don't know if you want to send it to me, but if you do, I'll take a look. And so they do, fairly frequently send me stuff. Now, it turns out that photography is a hobby of mine I've had since the age of 8. So I can tell them, I can say, well, you know what that is? That's internal reflection in the glass elements of your zoom lens. That's what that is. Now, they're never happy when I tell them this. They never say, thanks, Seth. Wow. Okay, great. Now I know what it was. But, whatever. But I've never seen anything where I thought, my God, this is it. Right. I mean, nothing would make us happier here at the SETI Institute than to learn that there are aliens just out and about. They're just, around the neighborhood. If they are here, by the way, I just suggest to you that if they are here, you got to say they're the best house guests ever, right? I mean, they don't kill anybody. They don't solve any of our problems, right? They've been here, if you believe it, for 70 years, and they've done essentially nothing. They don't do anything. And I'm sure that the Incas of Peru would have liked it much better if the Spaniards had come to their country and not done anything, but it didn't work out that way in any case. So, you know, the aliens are great. I mean, I'm happy to coexist with them because they don't seem to ask much.
Right.
And if you're someone watching this segment and you have seen an alien and you have the evidence, please send it to Seth. He has been working long and hard to show us that the aliens don't exist. So maybe it's time to
Try to
show
show you
him
that they do.
one before he retires.
Yes, right. That's right. Send it to me. If it's for real, it will mean job security for me. So, you know, take some pity on my precarious situation and send me the best evidence you have.
Jamie, do you want to ask Seth anything else? We're almost out of time.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would love to ask Seth, like, okay, so do you believe that one day that you'll, you know, with the work that you're doing, if you know, continue persevering, if SETI continues along its path, that one day we'll sort of make contact or, you know, discover something?
Well, I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't do this. I mean,
oh yeah, of course, yeah. But do you think it could be in your lifetime, or do you think
well,
we're a long way off?
I made the mistake of, during a talk I was giving in Europe, I bet everybody in the audience flat white. I think I said a cup of Starbucks. Anyhow, a cup of coffee, that we would find the aliens by about 2035, and that was based on the speed at which the equipment is getting faster. That's mostly computer technology, and we're in the Silicon Valley here, so we're well aware of how fast computer technology improves. Anyhow, so I did that. So, you know, either by 2035, you'll wake up and there'll be something to talk about with your spouse. Oh, look, Louise, they found aliens. Or you get a cup of coffee, right? So you really can't lose. I'm buying Starbucks stock just in case.
But deep down inside, what do you really believe?
No, I really do believe that. I think so, because by 2035, various SETI experiments will have looked at more than 1 million star systems. And, you know, just this is sort of like where we came in, the Frank Drake equation kind of thing again. But I figured that if you look at 1 million, the chances that you'll find one where there's some signals coming from don't sound to me like that's an impossible wish.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
You have anything else, Jamie?
Yeah. Have you got any vacancies there at SETI?
Yeah, with vacancies.
I'll come and join you, man.
Yeah, it might be my office. I don't know.
I'll make the coffee or something.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you know, I know that there's so much in the world that cannot be explained. And for us to think we know everything would be hugely egotistical. And unfortunately, we live in a world where if you don't have the proof, it's just an opinion or an idea. Because, like, I believe someone told me once, the difference between those who believe and those who don't is the evidence. So I guess until the evidence has really come forward and you, experts at the SETI Institute, are convinced that this evidence is really supporting something that fit the description of a UFO or an alien, we will continue to hear of people seeing them and have you said, pop their bubble.
Well, I'm not interested in popping anybody's bubble, but
and diss their ideas of what they think they're seeing.
Yeah.
Because I am going to tell you, I have many friends that are convinced that they've seen aliens. And I know many pilots, and I always ask them, they're probably sick of me. Have you ever seen a UFO? Have you ever seen an alien? They go, all the time, Jenny. We see things all the time we can't explain. And that's what we call them because they're unidentified flying objects. So I don't know, Seth. We all don't know. But if you've got these big, sophisticated equipment mounted in places where you can monitor this, and you are saying no, until someone comes forward with some evidence, I just have to accept no.
Well, no, you don't, Jenny, and you won't anyhow. Look,
You know me so well.
well, yeah, no, I mean, there could be aliens camped out on the summit of Mount Shasta, and our equipment would never find them. We're looking at, things that are very far away. So anything that's nearby, we wouldn't find. But there are plenty of other things that would find them. So that's the thing. I mean, you're right. We certainly don't know everything. Probably we're a long way from knowing everything. But on the other hand, in science, it's like somebody said, if it's the quality of the evidence. Whoever told you that, did you believe them? Did they show you at least some evidence that what they were saying was true? I assume so.
Well, here in the UK, we have a lot of crop circles, and you can tell the difference between the fake ones and the ones that are a mystery. Because like the fake ones are obvious, but the ones that are a mystery are kind of done in the pitch dark very quickly with amazing precision. And then there's like the crops aren't damaged, they're weaved, there's radiation readings on the ground, there's like loads of strange anomalies. And these crop circles, they're popping up all over the place in like the Wiltshire area.
Well, Hampshire and Wiltshire's where they normally pop up. But on the other hand, do pay attention to the fact, Jamie, that they've gotten much more complex with time. And they're actually not so complex to begin with. They're very symmetrical.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody familiar with information theory knows that if there's a lot of symmetry, then there's no message, right? I mean, think about it. And, my grandparents had a tile bathroom floor in their apartment in New York. And, every other tile was black. And then the white tile, white tile, black. So it was a lot of symmetry.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could sit there and try and read the floor, but it was, it wasn't very interesting because there's no information in it because of the high symmetry. And that's true also for the crop circles. And in fact, there are plenty of these artist collectives in the UK who say, yeah, we built that. And you can refuse to believe them if you want. But the fact that there's some radioactivity there, I suggest you just go out in your backyard in Ireland with a Geiger counter and you'll find some radioactivity too. That doesn't mean too much.
Sure.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. But before I wrap this up, this is what I think, Seth. I think they are so sophisticated and so much more intelligent than we are that they've learned how to be elusive and we can't spot them, even with our most sophisticated technology. There you go, my 2 cents.
All right. Well, you're the host of the show, so I bow to that.
But you're the expert. So anyway, before I go, is there anything you want to leave with my viewers, Seth?
No, I don't think so. I know about a third of you will be hopping mad. Thanks so much. But if we've done nothing else, we've at least got your juices flowing. Look at it that way. It's a good thing.
Thank you so much, Jamie. What about you?
No, I've it's been a great honor to be a part of this, and I thank you, Seth, and I think it's great the work you're doing, and I also respect you because I think that we need to have the due diligence that you have, that we don't jump to conclusions. I respect that completely, and maybe one day I'm a believer, but I think maybe one day we'll get all the evidence we need and it'll be great and we can all celebrate. Maybe we'll make some contacts and learn from another civilization. It'll be great. So, yeah.
Stay away from the Rendlesham Forest.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's another one. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there actually.
Have you? Yeah, that was well documented.
Well, yeah, but there's again, there perfectly reasonable explanations for what happened, just as there are for Roswell and many of these others.
Sure.
But you don't read about them too often.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for watching Conversations with Jenny Lynn. I continue to look for the best and the most inspiring, engaging conversations to share with you. And I am sure you're going to agree with me that this was one of them. Thank you so much to Dr. Shostak. Thank you so much to Jamie Smale. Thank you for continuing to watch Conversations with Jenny Lynn. When a conversation is all you need to be inspired, and I'm sure you're hugely inspired from this, and I will see you soon. Thank you.